Alright, so let's talk about anti-backlash nuts and whether or not they're even necessary. So to answer that question, we really need to know what backlash is in the first place. So we're going to be using this adjustable wrench as our little demonstration. So this little worm gear right here, whether you spin it one way or another, will engage on some threads that is attached to this particular component. And as we spin it, it goes up and down. So think of this little worm gear as your Z-axis lead screw, and think of this little component as your gantry. Now, look what happens when we move back and forth when moving this worm gear. If we move this worm gear in one direction, it'll engage one side of the teeth on these threads. But the moment we move the worm gear in the other direction, you'll notice there's a point where it's not engaging any of the threads. And that is absolutely necessary, because if the threads and the worm gear were the exact perfect fit, there wouldn't be any wiggle room to move anything. So as we move in the other direction, now we're engaging the opposite side of those threads. And as we move back and forth, this happens every time we change direction. And that is backlash, that extra movement required before you actually engage the threads to go the opposite direction. That is why we have anti-backlash nuts. So then you might ask yourself, how exactly does an anti-backlash nut deal with minimizing, reducing, or getting rid of backlash? And it's actually quite simple. You see that spring that is connecting what is actually two separate pieces here? And yes, this brass component is indeed two separate pieces. It is pushing these two brass pieces that are connected but separate in opposite directions. So that way, the top of this brass nut is engaging one side of the threads on the lead screw, while the bottom of this brass piece is being forced to engage the opposite side of the lead screw. So when it moves up and down on something like a Z-hop, your backlash is minimized because the threads in either direction are always being engaged. So in essence, what is happening is you have two lead screw nuts that are kind of connected together but being pushed apart by a spring. And that makes it so that the top lead screw nut is engaging the thread on one side, while at the exact same time the bottom lead screw nut is engaging the thread at the other side. And that is how we use an anti-backlash nut. However, you'll notice for this demonstration that I just showed you, we're in a horizontal orientation instead of a vertical orientation. And this is the topic of debate for a lot of people. The question is, does it even matter when you have the entire weight of the gantry pushing down on the lead screw nut anyway? Because what's going to cause it to have that issue? When you have the force of gravity forcing the lead screw nut always on one side of the lead screw. So to demonstrate that, we'll put force on the part that moves here, and we'll move it back and forth either way, and you'll see, because we have gravity pushing down on it, we don't really have any backlash from moving like this. So then, pray tell, you may ask, if that's the case, well, what's the point? And the answer is, it's not so clear. Here's the thing. When you Z-hop, you are forcing an object in motion, and an object in motion likes to stay in motion unless acted upon an equal and opposite force. So, when you Z-hop, you bounce a little bit. And that little bit of bounce, when you're moving up and down rapidly, especially during a lot of Z-hops, could cause some small artifacting. Is it a deal breaker? No, not really, but there are a number of people that report that when enabling Z-hop, anti-backlash nuts do help a tiny bit in removing some forms of artifacting in your printing. So, for a few dollars, it certainly doesn't hurt, but is it entirely necessary? Absolutely not. But I suspect the anti-backlash nuts are going to come far more in handy once we start getting to a point where 3D printing is going to get truly 3D, i.e. non-planar printing. Now, I don't have any examples of a print that is non-planar because non-planar printing is very much still in its sort of infancy stages at the moment, and having the right equipment to do it is very specialized. But Teaching Tech did a fantastic video on it. It's basically, instead of pancaking a two-dimensional layer of plastic on each other, your hot end actually can move up and down on the z-axis as it's printing in real time to make like these beautiful finishes at the end, and it's just absolutely incredible. And I suspect when we're moving up and down a lot more than just with z-hopping, that the anti-backlash nuts will help in that regard, but that's just speculation on my part. The current situation is some people say that anti-backlash nuts improve quality in certain regards to z-hopping. And in my experience, I have been using anti-backlash nuts for a long time, and if they're giving me some benefit, that's great, and if they're not, well, it does make the rod a little more stable, but that's the reality of it. The evidence is sort of anecdotal, so it's just one of those things, you know. Perhaps in this particular case, it's not necessary, but then again, maybe not. I wish I could give you guys a more definitive answer on this, but I can't really afford to take apart my production machine to really experiment around with this. All I can say is it doesn't hurt anything, but does it help? I can't comfortably say one way or another.